No, Cam Skattebo is not the next Christian McCaffrey, but I do see shades of another Pro Bowl running back in him.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks to all of you for making Locked On Sun Devils your first listen of the day. How do I see Cam Skattebo at the next level? Well, he's not Christian McCaffrey, but there are some pro comparisons I do like for him. We got to go through my scouting report. That's how we lead off this podcast. Forgive me, I'm not a pro. Before I let you know my 3 favorite team fits for him at the end of the show. First of all, I have the greatest shirt on in the whole world. It says, Cam Skattebo saved my life. And yes, it's the shirt that you saw during the Big 12 championship game. I had to cop one for myself. Fortunately, it's a little bit faded because I don't know how to wash clothes. But great shirt and great player. Cam Skattebo, the people's running back, as you like to call him on the Locked On Sun Devils podcast. Look, I am not someone who's going to pretend that I am this ace draft analysis guy. But I've seen every single one of Cam Skattebo's games since he got to Arizona State. And I feel more than knowledgeable about Cam Skattebo. So let me attempt to give you my own personal scouting report on what I see with Cam Skattebo. Because this report and this preview, I suppose, of Cam Skattebo is going to set up in the second segment why there are very lazy comparisons. And yes, it's for the reasons you think, why I like some a little bit better than others. All right, let's get to it. Cam Skattebo, officially labeled, or at least according to NFL.com. So I'm not sure if this is the legitimate measurements and everything, but they have him listed at 5'11", 215. And if that is the official measurement, well, that's perfect. That's perfect. Because at that point, you are not perceivably too small, quotation marks, fire the laser, that a lot of people want to paint Cam Skattebo out to be. Now, I've said many a times, Cam Skattebo is around 5'11" with cleats on, similar to how I am 6 feet tall if I round up by about a half an inch or so. It's right around that size. Like we're kind of splitting hairs at that point. Cam's more than big enough. Tall enough, I should say. But he is more than big enough too, 215 pounds. I mean, that's an NFL-sized running back right there. It's not like he's some scat back, no pun intended. It's a guy who looks the part and can take the beating too, because that's where I want to go next is the profile here, the resume that Cam Skattebo has. It's more than impressive, and it's something that I think a lot of people need to be more informed about. Is Skattebo did a lot of big things, man. Like even taking away the production that he put together at Sacramento State, where he was still a very good running back, Cam Skattebo in 2 seasons at Arizona State, 2,494 rushing yards, 5.5 yards per carry, 30 rushing touchdowns. He had 4 more receiving touchdowns. I believe he has 2 passing touchdowns as well. He was Mr. Do-It-All at Arizona State, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But on top of the great rushing numbers, he caught 45 passes for 605 yards last season. In his career at Arizona State, 69 receptions, 891 yards, 4 touchdowns. That is 12.9 yards per reception. 13.4 last year, 11.9 his first year. In all 4 of his collegiate seasons, including the 2 years at Sacramento State, he's always been above 10 yards per catch. Seriously? Do you guys realize that if you're getting about 7 to 7.5 yards per reception out of your running back, you are thrilled. You are getting nearly 13 yards per catch out of Cam Skattebo. Now, is that going to change? More than likely. How often do we see guys that are averaging over 10 yards per reception? I mean, I don't think Christian McCaffrey in his career is averaging 10 yards per reception. It just doesn't happen. It's going to drop. But going into the pros, that's going to let a lot of teams know, like, hey, this guy is a very, very good pass catcher. And this is one of the things that I believe is going to help separate Cam Skattebo from some of the other guys that are in this class, because there's a lot of really good players. Ashton Genty, Omarion Hampton, Isaiah Johnson, Quinshon Judkins, and Travion Henderson, and just this crazy amount of running back talent. This is a great year if you are an NFL team to get yourself a running back, whether it's a backup or a starter. But with Cam Skattebo, he may not be as elite of a athlete as some of those guys, right? But he is a very accomplished player. He is somebody that has a ton of statistics to back up how good he is. And again, that receiving prowess, man, that is so huge for him at the next level, to prove that there is any kind of role that you can find for Cam Skattebo. The best place is going to be as a receiver, at least to start his career. The famous Bill Belichick said something along the lines, I am paraphrasing here, of don't tell me what a player can't do, tell me what they can do, and I will find ways to get them on the football field. So an NFL team sits down with Richie Bradshaw, and they go, hey, I want you to tell me about Cam Skattebo. I'm not going to sit here and tell them, like, oh, he's a limited athlete and this, that, and the other. I'm going to go, yeah, he's a really good pass catcher, and he's someone who finds the end zone. They're going to go, okay, we'll find a role for him. That's what you need to do at, because the things that he excels at, the next thing up here, the things that he excels at, one, great pass catcher. We have established that. Two, he gets in the end zone. I mean, there is intrinsic value to that. 30 touchdowns at Arizona State. He had 9 in 2023 when that offense was dog water. He still had 9. That's just rushing, by the way. He did have a receiving touchdown to get him to 10. Like, he was the offense in 2023. Before in 2024, he was pretty much the offense once again, although there was plenty of contributors through the passing game thanks to Sam Levitt. But it was still the Cam Skattebo show starring Cam Skattebo. Like, he did everything for this offense, and 21 rushing touchdowns. Whew, man, that's a lot of rushing touchdowns. That is almost 2 a game. He played 13 games this last year because he had to sit out against UCF. 13 games, he had 21 rushing touchdowns, 3 more through the air. He was averaging almost 2 touchdowns a game. And I think there was 2 games last season where he didn't score a touchdown. Like, he just gets into the end zone. And there is, like I said, there is intrinsic value in these guys who can find the end zone. From the college to the pro level, that is something that NFL teams are looking at, is, does this player have a tendency to score touchdowns? It's not like this guarantees that Cam is going to be a double-digit touchdown guy every year, but there is that philosophy of, well, he knows what it's like to own real estate back there. That's something that we are going to seriously consider. Now, the things that I would tell you are the most important when it comes to scouting Cam Skattebo. Number one is the yards after contact. I mean, how many times have we sat here on this show? How many times have you tuned into other podcasts? How many times have you heard announcers on the games that you watch at home just talk about how it's absolutely absurd the way that he is able to take these hits and somehow the body control and the ability to absorb this contact and still stay upright. The best example, man, was against Utah. Like, somehow it looks like he's going down and he just puts his hand into the turf and pushes himself back up and finishes the run for a 50-yard touchdown. Like, I'm sitting there in the box, in the press box, and, like, obviously I am not nearly as close to being able to watch it as everyone else is at home when they're watching the broadcast. But I'm sitting there in the box. I'm like, there's no way he just did that. That's how obvious it was that he's just a really, really, really good player when it comes to absorbing the contact. Number two, he grinds out yards. How many games last year did we see teams stack the box and say, Skattebo's going to have to beat us. We're not going to let, or we're going to take away Cam Skattebo. That's what they thought. And we're going to force Sam Levitt to beat us. Like Mississippi State did everything they could against Cam Skattebo. That box had 7 defenders nearly every single down. He still ran for over 200 yards. Texas State, they held him under 3 yards a carry. He had 22 carries in that game. Still scored twice. Like it doesn't matter the way that defenses approached him because somehow, some way he was going to make an impact. Against Texas, they clamped him for 2.5 quarters. And then all of a sudden it's just like, well, I am inevitable. I am inevitable, as Thanos once said, because eventually Cam Skattebo wore them down and then he wins offense or just flat out the MVP of the game on the losing team in the Peach Bowl. He is special. Now, I do want to remind everyone that this weekend, the NFL Combine is very, very, very important for Cam Skattebo. He needs to find a way to separate himself from his peers and show like, hey, I'm still more than quick enough. I have the athleticism that I am perceived to not have. Because if he doesn't test well, then people are going to drop him down their boards. One last thing I want to say before we head into our first break. Cam Skattebo is a downhill runner, but he is not a power back. What do I mean by this? Power backs. Let's think of some of the best power backs ever. Okay. Well, you've got Marshawn Lynch very, very recently, one of the best power backs ever. John Riggins, I'd put him up there too. Earl Campbell. And, oh God, it was another Tennessee guy. Eddie George. There's tons of guys that you can come up with comparisons for when it comes to these power backs. And Cam Skattebo is not a power back. His game is not predicated around putting guys in the turf and just putting his head down and running through guys. He's not that guy. He's somebody that is able to make guys miss in space. He's able to absorb the contact, and it feels like he's got a Black Panther suit, right? Like let's try one more time. Kinetic energy. There we go, Richie. And he just takes it and he's just able to apply it to everyone else. You see that suit start to glow maroon and gold, and then boom, it just pops out and everything. Like he's not a power back, but he is a physical runner and he's a downhill runner. I've seen a lot of comparisons for Cam Skattebo, and a lot of them are really lazy. Those are coming up next. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let me tell you about our friends over at Fabric. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that helps your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right now from your couch. You can be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. You can get that peace of mind as a parent. You want to make sure that your family is financially protected no matter what happens, and Fabric is going to give you that peace of mind. You can get affordable coverage as well. Millions of dollars in coverage for far less than $1 a day. Protecting your loved ones doesn't have to break the bank with Fabric. And of course, they offer free digital wills and access to investment accounts to help plan for your children's future. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to keep, protect, and help their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's MEET fabric.com/lockedon. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Thanks as always for tuning in to make Locked On Sun Devils your first listen of the day. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Pro comparisons. Everyone loves to make them. Nobody knows how to do them. It's really fun to look at a player and go, oh yeah, that's the next Jim Brown. and it's not the next Jim Brown. Boy, oh boy, what a mistake that once was for some very unfortunate person who thought that they knew what they were talking about. I have no idea who that person could be. Everyone loves to make the pro comparisons, and so many people don't know how to do them. So we look at players like Cam Skattebo and we see what they look like, you know what I'm referring to, and we start making those comparisons, right? You see a running back like Cam Skattebo who looks the way he does, and you go, oh, that's Christian McCaffrey. Oh, that's Danny Woodhead. Oh, that's Mike Allstott. No, you don't know ball. Let's go through why those don't make sense, plus the other ones that I have seen. First of all, Christian McCaffrey. No, he's just not Christian McCaffrey. Do people realize how insanely talented, athletic, and explosive that Christian McCaffrey is? Like, he is next level talented. His dad, Ed McCaffrey, he's got NFL bloodlines. He is 10 times the athlete that his dad was. And his dad was one of the standout receivers of the 80s and the 90s when he won Super Bowls with the Broncos. He is special, Christian McCaffrey. There is no guys that should be easily compared to a guy like Christian McCaffrey. Okay, I see Peyton Hillis a lot. The fullback? Peyton Hillis, the fullback, right? Oh, he had that 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 yard season with Cleveland. Okay, that's a season. And again, they play very different styles of football. He was a fullback coming out of Arkansas, and that was essentially the role he played at the pros. Like, there's a reason after that his success was not sustainable. Okay, he's the next Mike Allstott. No, you don't know ball at that point. You do not know ball. Mike Allstott was almost 50 pounds heavier than Cam Skattebo. That's absolutely ridiculous to me. And you know why that comparison is being made. 33rd team. You know why. Kyle Juszczyk. Again, the fullback. Like, you know what you're doing. Cam Skattebo is more than Kyle Juszczyk. And don't get me wrong, I love Juszczyk. I love the fullback position. Bring back the fullback. He's not what Cam is. He's just a better all-around player. Certainly as a runner, he's Larry Csonka. First of all, I doubt you watched Larry Csonka for you to make that comparison. Did I? No, but I'm not stupid enough to say he's the next Larry Csonka. You know, one of the best running backs of all time. They have different play styles, and again, Cam is just very different. Okay, who's Danny Woodhead? He's not Danny Woodhead. He catches the ball, sure. He does more than that. Okay, here's some comparisons I don't mind. Toby Gerhart. We all know why that's being made, but it's not the worst, I guess. Like, it's there. They're similar builds. They're similar athletes. Gerhart was a 4'6" guy. He was super productive at Stanford. He was a Heisman Trophy finalist. Like, I see it. It's not the worst thing in the world. I don't hate that. Next up is Doug Martin. That's also fine, but that feels like it's more about size than anything, because Doug Martin was a much better athlete than people realize. But, you know, he was, 5'8" or 5'9", about 215, 220 pounds, like the muscle hamster, which I don't care what Doug says. That's a great nickname. I feel so bad that he hated it, but I loved that nickname. It's okay. I feel like that comparison is much more about size. James Conner. Okay, he's smaller than Conner, but I do see similar game styles, right? James Conner is a big dude, but he's not this power back. He's someone that is not afraid to take on contact, and he can force guys to bounce off of him, and he's a sneaky good pass catcher. Similar in a way to how Cam Skattebo is not a power back. He can absorb contact, but Cam is an elite pass catcher. Both of them score touchdowns. It's fine. It's not the best in the world. It's not the worst. Tyler Algier. Okay. That one isn't horrible because they're very comparable from size, athleticism, stuff like that. I don't hate that one. It's not bad. Daniel Jeremiah from NFL Network, who I know is very respected in the community, compared him to Jaylen Warren. By the way, that's the guy. I couldn't remember his name yesterday. I struggled to do it, and I could not get there. That was him. Jaylen Warren. It's not bad. The size is pretty close. Believe it or not, Cam is taller than Jaylen Warren. Warren is much closer to that Doug Martin size. I think that Cam projects better as a overall runner, though. Like, we've seen what Jaylen Warren is, and he is a terrific complementary back. Now, he might be a starter next year for the Steelers, depending on what happens with their backfield. Najee Harris could be back. They could draft a guy. I don't know. But Warren is in for a much bigger role next year. I don't know if he can be the guy, but I do know that a complimentary back, he is terrific. And they're both really good pass catchers. Now, the best comparison that I have seen, and I share this comparison, I didn't come up with it, but this was a perfect comparison. It's my good friend, Damian Parson, works for Bleacher Report, and he runs the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. If you are an NFL Draft fan and you're not listening to Locked On NFL Draft, you got to fix that. It is such a good, informative show. And Damian Parson, he's one of the best in the business, man. Like, he needs way more love than he's getting, especially because I think this is a perfect comparison. He calls him a, quote, slightly bigger Kyren Williams. At the top of the show, I teased, hey, I like this comparison to a Pro Bowl running back. There he is. Kyren Williams. He's taller than Kyren. Other than that, I feel like they're the same guy. Both have a nose for the end zone. They're both elite pass catchers. They're both guys that aren't these power backs, but they absorb contact. They're guys that have really good contact balance, and they're able to run through guys without breaking ribs and everything like that. They're just good pass catchers, man. They're not this elite track star. They don't have that track speed, but they have game speed, and game speed is far more important. I want a guy who I know can break away down the field and finish the big play. I don't need someone who's running a 4.2. I need someone who, sure, they're a 4.5, but I know that when they get in the open field, there's not a lot of guys that are going to catch them. There is a distinctive difference, right, between game speed and track speed. Both of these kids, Kyren Williams and Cam Skattebo, have game speed. I just like that comparison. I love that comparison, rather. If you have a better comparison, let me know in the comments. You can hit me up on Twitter as well, at RichieBrads36. 3 teams that I think are a perfect situation for Cam Skattebo at the next level. That's coming up next. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's time to talk about our good friends over at Prize Picks. March Madness is right around the corner. It's basically here. It's the last day of February, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you can pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, it's easy, and it keeps every game exciting. This week, I'm going to be looking in the pros. I'm going to be taking a look at Jason Tatum and Anthony Davis. As long as Davis is healthy, we all know how that goes. Davis for the rebounds. Let's take Tatum for the points. It's quick and easy. Like I said, I love how I can make my picks in less than 60 seconds and stay engaged all year long, all game long, all week long. When I win, my money hits my account in as little as 15 minutes. There's no waiting around. And there's all sorts of weekly offers. I mean, none more fun than Taco Tuesday. And us in Arizona, we love our Taco Tuesday. You will get discounted player projections for even more value on days like Taco Tuesday. Download the app today. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you place your first $5 lineup. That's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. You guys are the absolute best for tuning in to Locked On Sun Devils and making us your first listen of the day. And a shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Certain teams I love more than others for Cam Skattebo at the next level. Look, Baltimore Ravens fan here. Do I want Cam Skattebo? You're gosh darn right I do. Is it the best fit for him? It's whatever. Like, we get the most out of running back, sure, but there's much more of a prowess to power backs, i.e. Derrick Henry. Well, who knows? I would love it. However, There are 3 teams that I feel are chef's kiss perfect. Number 1, and this is in order. We talked about them yesterday, and I will not back down off of this. It's the Denver Broncos. This is the spot for Cam Skattebo. I can get on board with him at several other places. If he is drafted by the Denver Broncos, I am all in on him, and I am taking a look on him very high in my fantasy football leagues. Now, keep in mind, not the best fantasy player, but I have won a championship in back-to-back seasons, different leagues. Sometimes I know what I'm talking about. More often than not really. He goes to Denver. This is the starting running back. There's no one on this roster that will compete with him. I said yesterday, I like Audric Estime. Like, he's quality. Julian McLaughlin is fine. They are not Cam Skattebo. Cam Skattebo is Timothy Turner. He is Timothy Chalamet. He is any other play on words he can come up with for that. He's him, and he's a great pass catcher. And that's something that Denver needs right now because they don't have an established pass catcher who isn't named Courtland Sutton. Like, they don't know what they're doing at tight end. There's a handful of receivers, Troy Franklin, Devon Vele, and who's their deep threat from Oklahoma? Of course, I'm not going to remember his name right now. It's Marvin Mims. There we go. They've got guys, but there's no one that is like that second option behind Courtland Sutton, and boom, that's Cam Skattebo. Him and Bo Nix will be best friends from day one. Skattebo will be the starting running back so he can get the yards on the ground, but I would expect him to be very, very productive in the passing game. I would be all over it, and he's a really good fit for a Sean Payton offense that likes to ask multiple objectives and tasks out of their running backs. Perfect down to the last minute details. Number 2, San Francisco 49ers. This is the Kyle Shanahan special, man. This is the guy for Shanahan. And if we're being honest, there's nobody in the NFL who is more equipped to develop a guy like Cam Skattebo. Shanahan is just amazing. He takes these running backs that you've never heard of, and he turns them into superstars. Like Alfred Morris with the then Washington Redskins. It's like a 5th-round pick out of Florida Atlantic, I believe. Might have been Central Florida. I want to say it was Florida Atlantic. He goes for 1,600 rushing yards that year. He leads the league if it wasn't for Adrian Peterson going for 2,097. That's nuts, man. And then he goes to Atlanta. And Devontae Freeman, who was a 4th-round pick out of Florida State, has consecutive seasons of 1,000 yards. The guy behind him, Tevin Coleman, who was a 2nd-round pick out of Indiana, one of the best complementary backs in the league. Then he goes to San Francisco, and he turns several guys into very good contributors for the team. And, of course, Christian McCaffrey eventually comes over, and McCaffrey wins Offensive Player of the Year. He realizes his true potential. And McCaffrey's still there, and he's going to be there for a few more years. And they still have the guys behind him, too. I can't remember the name of their number 2 guy. And they had a handful of very productive players this year. Like, they get the most out of their ground game. They don't need Cam Skattebo. Why not? Why not? If you're asking me for dream fits, that's it. That's number 2. Might be number 1. The reason why Denver is higher is because Denver will get him on the field sooner. Skattebo is probably RB3 at best. He could earn running back 2. And then in the best case scenario, he is the successor for Christian McCaffrey. He will not see a ton of starting time in San Francisco for a few years. Number 3, I think this might catch some people off guard. I'm going with the Chicago Bears here. This is a young offense, right? Caleb Williams, former number 1 overall pick, going into his 2nd year, rock solid rookie year. A lot of people ripped him. It was not as bad as what everyone wanted to make it out to be. He was a good player. He has a good cast of receivers. You've got DJ Moore. You've got Rome Odunze. There's Cole Kmet at the tight end position. DeAndre Swift is holding down running back right now. That's a good group, and I expect them to spend a lot of money in free agency and a lot of capital in the draft, upgrading what was probably the worst offensive line in football last year. Give me Cam Skattebo in there and have him play complementary to DeAndre Swift. Swift is a good running back. We know what he is, and he's limited. He can score touchdowns. He is a quality pass catcher. He's a better runner than people realize. This past year was underwhelming, but that was much more to do with the offensive line. Look at his first few years with Detroit. That's the kind of running back he can be. But Skattebo would go there. He would be the running back too. I would assume he's the priority guy for third downs and obvious passing situations. And I also believe that he will eventually usurp DeAndre Swift of the starting role. Put him in a young offense like that, he's going to thrive. Those three offenses, not only do I think they're perfect for him, but I think that they are offenses where he will see sustained long-term success in the NFL. Handful of other teams I want to throw out. Obviously, the Arizona Cardinals. It's just immaculate vibes, baby. Keeping him in the desert, activate the valley, goes to the pros. But he also fits what they like at the running back position. They just unfortunately have James Conner on an extension and Trey Benson going into his second year. So they don't need him, but it'd be fun. The Cincinnati Bengals, it would kill me as a Ravens fan, but you know what? That's a wide open offense. We just saw Chase Brown, who, if we're being honest, he's not like this elite running back, but he just went for what was 990 rushing yards. Like, he was just shy of 1,000. He would have got it if he wasn't injured. Put Cam Skattebo in that offense. He's a Pro Bowler. The Dallas Cowboys, they develop running backs as good as anyone. They've done it with all sorts of different coaches. Jason Garrett and Mike McCarthy have been able to get great seasons out of running backs. We'll see what this year looks like. But if there's a team with the history to get the most out of their running backs, it's the Dallas Cowboys. And then, of course, everyone's favorite fit, the Kansas City Chiefs. That offense right now, like, it's fine when you look at the running back position. Isaiah Pacheco, he's quality. Like, he's had some really good success. He's going into his final year of his contract. Do you want to pay him? I don't know. Kareem Hunt was rock solid last year. As far as I know, he's a free agent. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is no longer there. They need a running back. I would assume they take one probably within the first 3 rounds. They get Cam Skattebo. With Patrick Mahomes, man, yeah, that's game over for a lot of teams. That's the way that I see this playing out for Cam Skattebo. Those are my pro comparisons that I love and the lazy ones as well. The 3 team picks that I loved, and we broke down who Cam Skattebo is as a player. Remember, he's the people's running back. He can run it. He can catch it. He can pass it. He can punt it. And he's your mom's favorite player. Let me know in the comments what you think about Cam Skattebo and his prospects at the next level. I appreciate you guys for tuning in to make Locked On Sun Devils your first listen of the day. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Make sure that you hit subscribe, like, and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your shows, which includes YouTube and every podcast streaming that you can find. You can follow me on Twitter again at RichieBrads36, the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Leave a comment, hit me up. Let's have a conversation. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. As always, best fans in the world. We will be back on Sunday for a live episode of Locked On Sun Devils. We're going to talk about Cam Skattebo and how the day ended up going for him. He is performing tomorrow at the Combine, so make sure you tune in and give the people's running back your support. We're going to talk about him on Sunday. I will see you there for YouTube Live. Until then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.